In this video, we'll see how to perform operations with matrices, adding and subtracting matrices, and scalar multiplication. So first off, let's define a matrix. A matrix is a rectangular arrangement of numbers, variables, or expressions. And we have some examples of matrices here, and we can name these matrices by their sizes as well. So in these examples here, this first matrix is a 2 by 3 matrix. The reason it is because we have 2 rows and 3 columns. So when we describe a matrix, we talk about its number of rows first and then number of columns. The second matrix here is a 5 by 1. We have 5 rows and just 1 column. And the last one here is a 2 by 2 matrix. We call it a square matrix. Equal number of rows as columns would make it a square matrix. So a 3 by 3 matrix and a 4 by 4 matrix and so on would also be called square matrices. All right, let's take a look at scalar multiplication. For scalar multiplication, we multiply each entry in the matrix by the value outside the matrix. So we could see an example like this right here. We have 3a, and we look at matrix A. It's this matrix right here, this first one. So I want to multiply 3 times each of these values inside the matrix here. So I multiply 3 times each of these, and 3 times each of these on the bottom row as well. So when I do that, I'm going to get 3 times negative 8, negative 24, 3 times 9, 27, and 3 times 1 is 3. And then 3 times 5 is 15, 3 times 0 is 0, and 3 times negative 11 is a negative 33. Let's look down at the next example here. I'm going to multiply negative 6 times each of these entries in this matrix. This is a 1 by 3 matrix. So I'm going to take negative 6 times negative 5. That is positive 30. A negative 6 times a negative 10 is a positive 60. Excuse me. And finally, negative 6 times 7/8. So I'm going to take a negative 6 times 7/8 and put that negative 6 over 1. And I'm going to cross reduce. 2 goes into both of these. 2 goes into 6 3 times and into 8 4 times. So a negative 3 times 7 is negative 21. And 1 times 4 is just 4. So negative 6 times 7/8 is negative 21 fourths. And finally, let's take a look at this last example here. I have negative 2/5 times the matrix B. So I'm going to multiply negative 2/5 times each of these 4 entries here. So first off, I'll take negative 2/5 times 3. Nowhere to cross reduce here, so negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. 5 times 1 is just 5. So my first entry is going to be 6/5. And I'm going to take negative 2/3 times 8/9. Can't cross reduce here. Negative 2 times 8 is negative 16. 3 times 9 is 27. So I have a negative 16 over 27. Then I'm going to take negative 2/5 times 12. Negative 2 times 12 is negative 24. 5 times 1 is just 5. So I have negative 24 over 5. And finally, I'm going to take a negative 2/5 times 1/10, a negative 1/10. I'm going to change that decimal to a fraction so they're both in the same form here. So negative 1/10. I can cross reduce here. 2 goes into 2 once. 2 goes into 10 5 times. A negative 1 times a negative 1 is a positive 1. And 5 times 5 is 25. So my last entry is 1/25. Okay, let's take a look at matrix addition and subtraction. We want to add or subtract pairs of entries in our matrices, and they must be the same size to add or subtract. So if I look at this first example here, I want to take A minus C. Well, if I look at A, A is a 2 by 3 matrix, and C is just a 1 by 3. They're not the same, so I cannot add or subtract these two together. But I can do this next one here, A plus B. So I substituted my matrix here for A and my B matrix here for B, and now I'm just going to add each of these entries together. They're the same size. So I've got both of these are 2 by 3 matrices, so I can add them together. So when I get my answer here, I'm just going to look at this. Negative 8 plus negative 3 is a negative 11. 9 plus negative 12, negative 3. 1 plus 4, 5. That's my top row. 5.3 plus negative 7. So I know if I've got 5.3 plus negative 7, the way I think about this is I say to myself, well, I need to find the difference of these two. So what's the difference of 7 and 5.3? The difference of these two is 1.7. But I know I've got a 5.3 and I'm adding a negative 7, so I know my answer, my sum there, is going to be a negative sum, a negative 1.7. 0 plus negative 5 is just negative 5. And negative 11 plus a negative 3/11. Well, if I imagine on the number line I'm at negative 11 and I'm moving 3/5 in the negative direction, then my answer is going to be negative 11 and 3/5. And that is how I would add those two matrices together. All right, for these following here, just practice these problems here. You can hit pause and do them on your own, and then I will show you how they're done. So we have two problems here. The first one is you're going to take B minus A. Be careful with that subtraction there. And then the second one, you're going to multiply 15/16 times matrix C. Okay, now that you have done these problems, let's go through this. I'm going to, again, take each of these entries, and in this case now I'm subtracting them. So I'm going to take negative 3 minus a negative 8. Remember, if I'm subtracting a negative, it's like I'm adding, so negative 3 plus 8 is a positive 5. Negative 12 minus 9 is negative 21, and 4 minus 1, 3. Negative 7 minus 5.3. If I'm at negative 7, I'm moving 5.3 more in the negative direction. That's a negative 12.3. Negative 5 minus 0, just negative 5. And negative 3/5 minus negative 11. So that's negative 3/5 is plus 11 is what I want to think about this. So if I think to myself, if I'm at 11 and I'm adding a negative 3/5, then I'm going to still be in the positives, but it's going to be at positive 10 and 2/5. Because basically what I want to figure out there is what's 11 minus 3/5, and that's 10 and 2/5. Okay, and for our final example here, okay, on this last sample, we want to multiply 15/16 times matrix C. So I'm going to multiply 15/16 times each of these entries here. 15/16 times 3/5. I'm going to cross reduce here. 5 goes into 5 once, it goes into 15 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9, and 16 times 1 is 16. So my first entry is a 9/16. I'm going to multiply next 15/16. This is times a negative 1 and 2/3. That's a mixed number, so I want to change it to an improper fraction. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3 plus a negative 2. That's negative 5 over 3. I can cross reduce again. 3 goes into 3 once. It goes into 15 5 times. 5 times negative 1 is negative 25. 16 times 1 is 16. So my second entry is negative 25 over 16. And finally, I want to multiply 15/16 times 4. I'm going to change that whole number to a fraction by putting it over 1. And 4 goes into 4 once. It goes into 16 4 times. 15 times 1 is 15. 4 times 1 is 4. So my final entry is 15 fourths. And that is how we perform operations with matrices.